welcome to our ongoing series hosted by the Center for Mind, Brain, and Culture here at Emory and the Center for Contemplative Studies at Keio University, and also supported by the Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics. We started this last year, and as a way for those of us at Emory to get to know the folks in Japan at Keio, and it's grown to include other people at other institutions as well. And so it's an informal seminar series to talk about issues related to cognitive science, empathy, contemplative science, of mutual interest, and also for us to find a way of getting to know each other. We've had many wonderful visits back and forth. Dietz Stout here, who's director of the CMBC, has visited Keio, given a talk there. We've had representatives from Keio, including the center's director at Keio, Yuki Emoto, and others come over to Emory. Members of our social empathy lab went over to Keio last December and presented at a joint Emory-Keio conference on embodied cognition and social AI and empathy and robotics. And so this has been a really wonderful series. We have two wonderful speakers today. This is our first time with two speakers. MASAKI Matsubara, who's a professor at Tsukuba University in Keio, and also, at Tsukuba University, and also affiliated with Keio, where he also leads the Laboratory for Somatic Intelligence and Artistic Expression. And Masaki has also presented at the Keio conference in December, which was wonderful. And then he'll be going after we hear from Professor Jared Medina, who's here at our own psychology department here at Emory, and also affiliated with the CMBC, who also has done research in connection with Japan and on robots and on embodied cognition. So this is really wonderful. And a little bit of context is that we are also here at Emory at the Social Empathy Lab preparing for the receipt of this social empathy robot, Haru, which we'll be doing research on, and which was the topic of our conference in December 14th at Keio in Tokyo with the Honda Research Institute. And Jared and Masaki are among the people who have offered to help us actually figure out what to do with this robot and how to do research with that. So the topic of embodied cognition is very applicable to us. So we're going to hear from Jared first and then from Masaki, and then we're going to have a discussion. But since the purpose of this is also for us to get to know each other, perhaps we can go around and just say a word of introduction among those of us who are here. Let us know where in the world you're located, what your interest is in this topic, this group, anything else briefly that you'd like to share with us so we can get to know each other. And maybe perhaps we can start with Dietz, since you...
Really, just welcome. It's really nice for us all to be together this way, and I really appreciate Brendan for taking the lead on organizing these hybrid seminars that we're having. This is exactly the kind of thing that the center exists to promote. Apart from being the director of the center, I'm actually an archaeologist. I study human evolution, and particularly skill acquisition in the deep past, which brings me around to my own personal interest in embodied cognition and the acquisition of techniques of the body.
Hi, my name is Taylor Northfleet. I'm a law student. I'm interested in AI ethics and policy. So I'm taking the graduate class with the Mind Brain Center, and yeah.
I'm Sage Sandhu. I am a fourth year studying psychology and neuroscience. I really like the concept of embodied cognition because I am coming at things from a more neuropsych perspective in my own research. And I think not only can cognition be housed within, it can also be projected outwards. And I think that's an aspect I'm very interested in.
Hi, my name's JD. I'm a junior. I'm studying psychology and I'm a member of the Social Empathy Lab. I'm excited to be here because I've heard a lot about Haru and I'm excited to see how all the information in the seminar applies to that project.
I'm Jared Medina. You'll be hearing a lot from me. So I'll save it for the talk.
Thanks, Jared. We go to our online participants. Masaki?
Hi, and nice to meet you, everyone. And I'm Masaki from Tsukuba, Japan. And I also saved the time for the talk. So later I'll talk my journey.
All right, thanks, Masaki-san. Yunwan?
Hi everyone, it's so nice to meet you all. I'm a fourth year PhD student at Emory in anthropology, and I'm also a member of Social Empathy Lab. I'm currently doing my fieldwork in Korea, so it's I'm at the same time zone with Dr. Matsubara, and I'm working on grief as an embodied emotion, and so I'm mostly interested in how this embodied and sometimes not. Um, Unspeakable emotion of grief is being transmitted to other people and communicated. Thank you.
Thanks, Yunwan. And I should say Yunwan is also offered to be our next speaker in this series. So we'll be scheduling that shortly. Thank you, Yunwan. Her research has been really, really fascinating. Ellie?
Hello, my name is Ellie Kim. I'm a sophomore here at Emory, double majoring in dance and business. I'm also a member of the Social Empathy Lab.
Thank you, Ellie. Okay, we have here Morris Bell. Morris?
Yes, hello. I'm Morris Bell. I'm a professor emeritus at Yale and senior research career scientist nationally with the VA. And so I've been involved in the health side of embodied cognition for a long time. And I invited Dietrich to come and be to join me in a large international symposium on embodied cognition that we're going to have at Yale. And he was nice enough to send me this invitation. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Nice to see you.
Thank you so much for joining, Morris. Noriko-san? Noriko?
Hello. Hi. Sorry, I have my uh camera off because I'm sort of getting ready for the day because it's 7 a.m. here. So please excuse me. I'm Noriko. Some of you might have met me already in Atlanta or at Keio. I'm a member of, I'm a researcher at Keio's Center for Contemplative Studies, and I'm mostly involved in programs, the educational program C-Learning and CBCT for educating compassion. Yeah, so very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting.
Thank you, Noriko. Sanjay Jain?
Good afternoon. I think I'm an outlier. My name is Sanjay Jain. I'm a medical oncologist, actually, but for several years I've been attending CMBC and Carlos offerings. I really enjoy them a lot, and I learn a lot. And particularly this forum this year, series of empathy and compassion. I'm very interested in learning how I can better apply it in my own practice and philosophy. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to participate.
Great. Thank you, Sanjay. Sarah Thomas?
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. My name is Sarah Thomas. I'm an Oxford and an Emory College alum. I actually am a lawyer by trade, but I work right now in Emory's research unit. So I handle research contracts with the federal government. And so I'm interested to see how technology, law, health, ethics all intersect, especially in this environment and hopefully in the future environment.
We have a lot of lawyers.
I
don't know.
What is it?
Kantanu Katia?
Yeah. Hi, hello. Well, I'm a second year student in Emory Anthropology Department. I'm actually studying my supervisor, Professor Dieter Stout, and yeah, I mean, I'm basically an archaeologist, but I'm very interested in how we started making stone tools in our own lineage. So yeah, so of course, like when you talk about cognition and like this embodied perspective, I'm interested in learning more about it.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I think his last person, Yolanda. Hi, Yolanda.
Hi everyone, my name is Yolanda. I am an Emory graduate. I study psychology and data science back at Emory, and right now I'm a first year MSW student at University of Chicago. I have been a member of Contemplative Lab for a while and continually doing research with Brendan on the embodied AI in artificial settings. So very happy to be here with everyone today.
Wow. And Yolanda is a reporter in the field, reporting from the field. You look great. Yolanda.
Sorry about that. I was walking from a meeting to my hotel. So I will
You
be
look very professional. You look like a
Sorry.
CNN reporter.
I'll be settling you really soon. Sorry about that.
Our first CMBC.
Yeah, great. In a while. Yolanda is also the one who gave the talk at Honda's headquarters in Tokyo last summer on our lab's research on empathy that got us Haru, the robot. After that talk, they were like, okay, we're going to build a robot for you. So Yolanda is an important person for us. Okay, so we'll start off with you, Jen. And thanks everybody for introducing
Forgot
yourselves,
about
and we'll
me.
get started. Oh, I'm sorry, Sydney. I'm sorry, Sydney. My apologies, please.
I'm a senior at Emory. I'm actually originally from Weston, Connecticut. So Dr. Bell, I'm from Connecticut. Anyway, I'm a human health major on the pre-medical track, and I've been with the Social Empathy Lab for the past 2.5 years. I was with the lab when we traveled in December to Keio University to the conference, which was an amazing experience, and just traveling around Japan. And I more recently have been working on the oncology project, observing the presence or lack thereof of empathy in oncology care within young adults, adolescent patients. And I'm excited to hear whatever the say today.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I missed you there, Sydney. Thank you. Okay, we will get started with Jared then.
All right, everybody. As I go and set up my screen, I was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut. So
Yay.
another Connecticut thing going on. Let me make sure that it is sharing correctly. Oh, okay, so everybody's seeing that, and I gotta also make sure that I can control it, which I think I can. Good. Hi. So, can everybody hear me? There? Yes. Okay, good. So, hi, I'm Jared Medina. I guess I do embodied cognition in the sense that I do a lot of work on, I'm a cognitive neuroscientist by training who does a lot of work on the topic of embodiment. Specifically looking a lot at the perceptual aspects of embodiment and essentially trying to understand how our brain does that. But there are lots of interesting ways in which the study of embodiment, even at the perceptual level, seeps into other aspects of what we're doing to get into things like empathy and things of that sort. And so what I thought I'd kind of do today is sort of a bit of an introduction to some of the research that I do on this topic, and then I'll kind of sort of meander my way into talking about how it relates to some of these concepts like empathy and sort of interaction with robots and things of that sort. So I'll just start with a quote from William James, kind of the big famous psychologist. "The body is the storm center, the origin of coordinates, the constant place of stress in all that experience strain. Everything circles around it and is felt from its point of view." So William James, like one of the kind of classic psychologists,
talked about how the body was an important part of the experience. And there's this nice tradition in phenomenology about talking about the body in the first person experience, right? You talk about your conscious experience of this, and a lot of really interesting things about embodiment kind of just start from consciousness. And like me talking about like what is it like to have a body and things like that. However, I'm also an empiricist who's trying to do experiments on these things as well. And there you have limits to what introspection can give you. It's sort of a big part of the development of the history of psychology and neuroscience over the last 100 and 150 years. So then that kind of brings up the question, how do you understand how the body, how can you understand how the brain represents the body? So one thing you can kind of think of as like a brain in a vat study, right? So I go and I could just try and compare like what it would be like to live with a brain in a vat versus having a brain in a body. But clearly this is something that's not possible, so we're not able to do that. One way in which we try to look at this, though, in our lab and in some of the research that I'm going to be talking about is by perceptual illusions, right? And with a perceptual illusion, what you can do is you can kind of alter someone's embodiment, right? So you're not going to make it to where they can't have a body, but you can alter their embodiment such that I might make it to where it feels like you have an extra limb or you don't, or things like that. Another way you could do it, which I forgot to put a little animation there up for, is by looking at individuals with brain damage. So we've made a lot of really interesting advances in the study of all sorts of aspects of cognition by looking at people with brain damage, whether it's when they have problems with language or attention or other kinds of deficits. Interestingly, there are people with brain damage that have problems with embodiment. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about that. And then also kind of the first part. And then one of the interesting things about this that I want to talk about is that mechanisms for embodiment allow for vicarious touch. So another part of the research that I've done in the past is looking at these people that have this condition called mirror touch synesthesia. I'll talk about it more, but it's basically if I do this and you're somebody that has mirror touch synesthesia, you'll actually feel that touch. And interestingly, that has neat mechanisms neurally and cognitively, but it relates to concepts of empathy. And in fact, it's been studied here. And then at the very end, I'm going to briefly discuss how this relates to social AI. If anyone at any point has questions while I'm doing this, feel free. Like I'm giving a lecture, but like I'm more than happy to be interrupted with any questions. Just put your little hand up on the Zoom thing if you want, or if you're in the room, just feel free to blurt out your questions, and I'm happy to answer them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with some basic illusions that have been done to look at these things perceptually. First is the rubber hand illusion. This is a very classic one that some people are nodding here because they've seen it before. Maybe they've seen this particular GIF. So basically the way it works is that if you can see here, this individual has their actual left hand is sort of behind an occluder. They can't see it. And they see a left hand there. And what's going to happen is that the person is going to have both hands stroked at the exact same time. So I'm going to play this GIF right here. And you can kind of see the stroking happen. And then, well, that's not the part of like the classic illusion there. Although actually there are experiments that have done that. So I'll talk about it in multiple ways. The idea is that if you stroke both the left hand that you can't see and the rubber left hand at the exact same time, people will have to start to have this sense of embodiment over that rubber hand. So they'll in fact, if we go to the very first paper that's been done on this back in 1998, they asked them questions like, do you agree with this statement? It seemed as if I were feeling the touch of the paintbrush in the location where I saw the rubber hand being touched, or I felt as if the rubber hand was my hand. And most everybody either completely agreed or very strongly agreed with these statements. So they had this strong sense that their hand felt like the rubber hand, and that stabbing with the fork, there's an experiment that's actually with that, because what you can do is look at what's called galvanic skin response. So basically how much, you kind of react to the fact of something threatening happening. And they did a control condition where they don't stroke them at the same pace at the same time. They stroke it asynchronously, where you don't give them that embodiment to happen. And they found that the galvanic skin response was actually much higher for the threat when you had the synchronous versus the asynchronous stroking. So it wasn't just that they were jumping because some strange person stabbed something in front of them, but it was specifically with regards to the embodiment that was there. Now, once people actually, it's sort of interesting, the story behind it. Botvinnik and Cohen, they're two Princeton professors who had a Halloween party, and there was a rubber hand, and they were kind of decided, like, oh, you know what? Like, let's fool around with this. Let's stroke it. Let's see what happens. And they turned it into an experiment. They then maybe wrote like one other paper on it, and then they completely like dropped it as a research thing. Botvinnik, like, is I think at DeepMind now, and Cohen's very well known Princeton professor for other kinds of topics. But what happened is that other people thought, huh, this is a really interesting paradigm to understand embodiment, right? Because now what we can do is we can manipulate the kinds of things that are there to make it, to kind of find out, like, what are the constraints? Like, what can you embody? What can't you embody? And what role can that play in processing? So what they did, and I'll just talk about a couple of them here, is they would go and say, all right, let's see what makes you embody or not embody. So for instance, if you go and you do something with a biomanically implausible position of the rubber hand. So let's say in that picture that you have right there, that the rubber hand here is, say, like turn 90 degrees in a way where like your left hand couldn't be in that position. Like if you took your left hand and put it in that position, it can't be there. The illusion doesn't work, okay? If it's something that's not a hand, right, then the illusion doesn't work. But interestingly, you can have it work like if it's a different skin color, for example. So if you have a light skin and you have a dark skin hand, like the illusion works just fine, okay? So there are some constraints on this that led to theories about this what they call the neurocognitive body model of body ownership. I have some qualms with it, but I'll present it here for now, is that there are various steps that the brain has to take to decide whether to embody something or not. So the first one is what they call visual form. And basically it's the idea is that the viewed object has to be body-like. Okay, and if it's not, then you're not going to get ownership of it. And in fact, if you if you try to do this illusion at home, one thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you, if you have, let's see, in the this camera right here, if you've got a rubber hand, right, you want to make sure that it doesn't look disconnected from your body. So usually what they'll do is they'll, like, if it's a rubber hand, they'll put a white sheet or some kind of sheet over it to make it look like there's still a connection. If you take that away, the illusion doesn't work. The brain has to think that the thing is connected to a body. Second thing is posture. If the viewed object is not in a posture consistent with the body, no ownership, which I actually talked about ahead of time. So sorry, that's the second point. The first point was just about the shape of it. It's got to be body shaped. And then obviously the timing has to be the same. A couple of additional interesting things is that the accumulation of evidence has to occur. The brain needs to be convinced that it is yours. And so if you just do one stroke or two strokes, it doesn't work. You have to do it for about, it varies depending on the individual, which is actually a completely different, interesting research question. Some people, like 5 seconds of stroking are enough. Other people, it takes 45, 60 seconds of stroking. But the idea is that if you just have like one event, the brain's not going to be convinced that that thing is yours. You have to have a lot of information where it's like, oh, that thing that looks like a hand is being touched in the same place at the same time as mine. And then over time, right, it's like after this happens enough time, the brain is like, okay, I think that's yours. And then you start to feel the touch on the rubber hand and other sort of illusions, parts of the illusion happen. So the rubber hand illusion is great. There's literally hundreds of experiments done with the rubber hand illusion. But there's a couple of ways in which it's a little lacking. One is that rubber hand lacks realism. So if you go and you look at that rubber hand, right, it's a rubber hand. It's not your hand. So in a sense, it's almost amazing that it works at all because you don't even have to have a super fancy looking rubber hand. You can have a pretty rubber looking rubber hand and the illusion will still work. And another thing is that you don't really have agency over the rubber hand, which is an important part in a lot of embodiment work. So like that rubber hand is just there. You can't really control it or anything like that, which leads to the illusion being okay, but not great. So then that leads into the second illusion that I'm going to talk about, which I've also done a fair bit of research on, which is the mirror box illusion.
And in this illusion, the idea is what you do is you basically can create a mismatch between the visual and proprioceptive estimate of the hidden right hand. So just to kind of set you all up here, basically you put your left hand there. And another thing about all these illusions is there are things that you could do. If you have a mirror or a rubber hand, they're super easy to do. So you all could do experiments yourself if you want. But basically, if you go and put your left hand here, such that the reflection of your left hand looks like your right hand is right here, sort of next to the mirror midline, but actually it's far away. And the subject doesn't see where their hand is. I'm just showing you all that to show that there's a mismatch between the visual information and the proprioceptive information. And then what you can do is various manipulations, like synchronous tapping of the fingers or something like that, to go. And then the idea is you then ask a question, all right, where do you feel like your hand is? And it's kind of a neat illusion because people will basically, after a little bit of time, and this is another one where the evidence needs to accumulate, but it's faster than the rubber hand illusion, people will have this shift that happens. And as an aside, for some people, it's a gradual shift from where the hand actually is to where they see it. For other people, including me, it's an immediate shift. So the hand starts off like far away, and then there will be a point where I'll just be like, okay, now I feel like my hand is where I see it. And it's interesting because it's very kind of cognitively impenetrable. I know I didn't move my hand. I know that my hand is actually where it is, but it doesn't matter. I feel like my hand is where I see it. Yeah, questions are great.
Just because I think that point is really fascinating, because it's almost like you have two things happening. There's one thing that's kind of emerging is the difference between what we're conscious of and what the body is doing. Like you said, the brain has to be convinced, but that could mean conscious processing or unconscious. I think you meant unconscious processing in that case, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in this case, you're talking about almost like two different conscious processes, because you're talking about your own subjective phenomenological realization that this shift happens instantly, and then your other cognitive intellectual knowing that your hand is actually somewhere else.
Yeah.
So there's like two things in consciousness. So they're like different levels of cognition we're talking about here.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. So when I kind of said the brain, right, I'm doing a very shorthand. If we want to get into it in a bit more detail, most of the mechanisms that are thought to drive this are unconscious mechanisms. So like that accumulate, we're doing some research now on the accumulation of evidence part. There's not like, it's not like you're thinking like, well, 3 strokes, I don't know, but 4 strokes, yeah, right? Like the idea is that there are these evidence accumulation parts of the brain that are kind of taking that information and saying like, all right, is this it? And then once that happens, your percept changes to where it's like, and for the rubber hand illusion, you feel at first like the strokes are on your hand, and then you start to feel the touch is on the rubber hand. And it's not like you're thinking about switching it, it just happens. The mirror box, even more so. Like there, it's, and you know, it still blows my mind because I've been doing this illusion for like a decade, and it doesn't matter. I put my hand, even if I try to think out of it, like it just happens, and I don't even know. I mean, I know sort of why it happened, but I can't control it. It just happens at an unconscious level. But the conscious part, yeah, I know I didn't move my hand. Like I know it's an illusion happening. Doesn't matter. The unconscious mechanisms that are involved in multisensory integration, which we'll talk about in a bit, are what lead to this happening. Yeah. And if there's other questions, or feel free to jump in. Okay. So why does it happen? So there's a problem of multisensory integration, right? We're getting input from all sorts of senses when it comes to our body, right? So when I think about embodied cognition, I first think there are many different ways to think about embodied cognition. In my research, I think about part of it as the problem of multisensory integration. I have to take all of this and put it together to create a coherent perception, right? That thing is my hand, right? And not somebody else's hand. Or that information that I'm getting from proprioception, which might be a little off, and that information I'm getting from vision, which might be a little off. Like what should the brain calculate as mine so that I can then have that conscious phenomenological experience of having my hand in a particular location. So what are the principles that are used to do this? So I'll give like a 1-minute introduction to optimal integration.
So imagine, I mean, y'all can try this at home if you want, but like one thing I'll often do in class when talking about this, they'll say like take your index finger of like your right hand and put it in front of you, and then close your eyes, and then take your hand index finger and then go and just try to make a movement without seeing to touch your right index finger. Just well, see, that was not very accurate. Y'all can try it at home if you want or not, but our information about where our body is in space from strictly the modality of proprioception, which is basically joint position and things of that sort without vision, is really bad. Okay. Vision, however, is actually quite spatially precise. And people have done these really neat, formulas are up on the screen, but we're not going to go into the formula. But basically, the idea is people have come up with these models called optimal integration models, which are essentially this idea that the brain knows about, or not the brain necessarily, the multisensory integration processes know about how precise the inputs from each modality is. So it knows from a lifetime of experience with vision that vision's really good at spatial stuff and proprioception's really bad at spatial stuff. Such that when I've got a mirror box kind of situation, I can go and put my hands in the mirror box. And even though there's a big discrepancy between the proprioceptive information and the visual information, the idea is that, well, over the course of my entire lifetime, vision's been the accurate thing. And as long as it's within a noise space, which I'm not going to talk about here, it's enough to have the illusion happen and have you feel like your hand is there. Another way that they've tested this empirically is that they just make vision noisy. And if you make vision noisy, the illusion dies. So if you just go and add like a bit of sort of like visual static to the thing, right? Now vision's like less reliable than it was before. Then it's like, well, now this is bad. And literally all you have to do is have that noise on for less than a second and the reweighting happens, right? So, and to get to the conscious experiencing, you're not conscious of any, I mean, you're conscious of the noise, right? But you're not thinking about that as changing the process. Your brain is immediately, or the multisensory integration mechanisms are immediately making that calculation. And then now that you have the mirror box, you can do cool illusions. So for example, here's one we did in our lab where, and you can do this as well. If you just go and move your hands like this, the video is not great, but if you just move your hands in that position, it's really neat. So you're looking at the hand on the left side that looks like it's palm down when your hand is actually palm up. And all you have to do is do that for about 10 seconds. And then suddenly you'll have the sense that your fingers are palm down and that your hand is moving palm down, even though it's moving palm up. Mm-hmm. And we've like monitored exactly where the hand is. We control for a bunch of factors, right? The multisensory integration mechanisms, right? The belief in vision is strong enough to where you can have this percept that's not happening. I mean, you're moving, but you're not moving in that position. Oh, there.
And again, I know I keep reinforcing this, but like that's like a phenomenologically reported sensation. Like you're relying on people's first person report of how it feels to them. Now I feel my hands inverted.
Yeah. So what we do in this, so some of our experiments, we use indirect measures. Yeah. This one does a direct phenomenological report where we just ask them after doing it, where's your hand?
Right.
Right. And then they go and we do statistical analysis on it and then get an output.
But the point I was trying to make earlier, when you ask them, where's your hand?
Mm-hmm.
Like what you were suggesting earlier is there can be a split. There can be like, I feel my hand is this way and I know it's actually this way.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting.
Yeah. So in this one, because it's a little novel to them and because they're not getting information about the other illusion that I talked about before, it's actually quite interesting. Your hand's on the table and you know you haven't moved it. When your hand's up like this, the subjects will actually say, did I move my hand?
Mm.
Right? And like, it's almost like, did I do this? Like their phenomenal, their conscious experience is confused by the phenomenological experience of the illusion, right? So because they're like, I don't think I moved, but maybe I've just been like rotating it really slowly. In fact, subjects will say this, maybe I've been rotating it slowly. I just didn't know that I was doing it. And that's why I'm feeling, and I just noticed it, right? When we've got like cameras and stuff that are monitoring where they are, and we're like, no, after these experiments over, no, that's not what happened. But yeah, it's really neat, like how thinking about the ways
the conscious part and the unconscious part interact is a really cool question. One more illusion before I talk about mirror touch synesthesia is the amboy-lin illusion. So you can do this to now actually kind of create modifications of your illusory modifications of your body. So in this one, it's hard to kind of show this in a video, but I'll just kind of use this drawing on the side. Here, basically, it's used as a mirror box. And so what the subject is doing is they're looking at the reflection of their right hand, okay, as their left hand. And they're in the same position in space, but they're not. So when you see this video here that I'm going to show you, that's the actual touch that they're getting. And then this on the right side is what they see happening on the left side. Okay, does that make sense? Sort of, yes. I'll say it again. What you're going to see on the left side is the actual touch. And on the right side, they're looking at the mirror reflection of that right hand as if it's their left hand. Okay? And so what you do is you just touch. Oh, it's choppy for some reason online, but basically you just touch each finger, right? 1, 2 at the same time, 3, 4 to build up the illusion. And then what you do is on the left hand, you touch the inside of the pinky and then on the outside of the pinky. But what you do is you then touch this empty space. And about 90% of the people that we test feel like they have a sixth finger. They feel like you are touching a sixth finger very strongly and very clearly. In fact, we're going to be doing this at the Atlanta Science Festival this week on Saturday. We did this at an outreach event last year. We had like a line that was like 30-minute wait long to like do this illusion because people would like, what? This is crazy. They'd like get their friends over. It's really neat. And then what you can do is you can use it to alter not just that experience, but you could do it to like give people sort of novel experiences. So you can make their finger feel longer. You can make the sixth finger feel curved. You can do all sorts of things. In fact, this illusion kind of breaks body constraints in ways that others don't, which we write about in some of our papers on this illusion. But it's another one where, you can kind of alter the conscious experience. One last thing, and I'm probably going over on time, so I'll go a little faster, is disorders of embodiment. So after brain damage, you could also have problems in which you have issues with embodiment. So these are usually after right hemisphere damage. One is asymptoagnosia, where after brain damage, you feel like the affected body part does not exist. The clinician could say, it's there, right? You're like, yeah, like I know it's there, but like in my mind, it's not there. It's faded or disappeared. Or there's somatoparaphrenia. I'm not going to read that interview to the side, but basically there, they will deny ownership of a body part and they'll attribute the ownership to somebody else. So they'll go and their right arm or their left arm, for example, they will say, that's not my left arm. You can say, well, it's connected to you, right? Like they're like, you can say what you want to say, but that thing is not my arm. That's your hand. That's somebody else's hand. And it's interesting because it's sort of, before people used to think that it was sort of like a psychiatric thing, but people are now thinking like, no, it actually has to do with problems with regards to the calculation of ownership. Because if we talk about those other illusions that we're talking about before, there are calculations that have to happen to put everything together to say that that is your hand, that is your body. And so if there's damage to the parts of the brain that do this, the idea is that like with the rubber hand illusion almost, right? I see something that looks like a hand, right? There I have to do the stroking, right? To make it feel like it's my own, right? But if the mechanisms that are involved in making these calculations are broken by brain damage, you can have it be where that's a hand, right? It's mine. Or in that's actually a different deficit. Or in this one, right? Well, it doesn't feel like it's mine because of the brain damage to sensory parts of the brain, right? It must be somebody else's. Right? So this idea of embodiment can be sort of malleable in different ways, which then gets to self-other distinctions. This is like the Spider-Man meme that people know about, right? I put it up there because it's a funny meme, but I also put it up there because, right, you have to be able to distinguish yourself from somebody else, right? And if you think about it, like bodies kind of look the same in many ways, right? We've got like most people have 10 fingers and 10 toes and things like that, but we have to be able to put those things together separate. So, and the reason I'm going to talk about this is I'm going to talk about touch for a second, because one thing that I think is interesting in the literature is that When we see touch happen on somebody else, our brain, this is not people, this is like anybody here in the room or they're online. When you see somebody being touched, so like right now I'm going to be stroking my face, right? If you're watching this, your brain is actually activating the same parts of the brain that are active for when that touch actually happens. And so there's a series of neuroimaging experiments that have been done where they've looked at this. So for example, Kuhn et al. 2012, they did 70 imaging, where they either like presented touch to a subject's hand, or they had them watch videos of a hand being touched. And in either case, what they found is this area called primary somatosensory cortex, which is the base level part of the brain where information about touch first goes into. The same parts are being activated. Okay, so if I go and if you're touched on the cheek, right, or you see somebody that's being touched on this cheek, the same parts are being active, right? Now, maybe not at the same levels of activation, right, but the same parts are being active. And what people have proposed from this is what they call a vicarious touch system. And then this got people thinking, well, what's actually going on here, and does it vary across individuals? And this led to the study of this condition called mirror touch synesthesia. So I'm sure maybe you have seen a sporting event or something like that, or maybe somebody like lands on somebody else, and you like, oh, you have that like gut feeling of like, oh, like I almost felt that. The idea is that people with mirror touch synesthesia actually do feel the touch that they see happening on other individuals. We've studied this in our lab, and other labs have studied this as well. So when viewing touch on another person, somatosensory regions are activated in the brain, right? Most people don't feel that, but people with mirror touch synesthesia do. So if I go and I do something like this, they will say, yes, I felt that on my cheek. Now, when it was first reported, it kind of had people that are like, I don't know, right? This is just phenomenological self-report. It's probably not something that's actually happening. But there are sort of two sets of studies that made people think, no, it actually is something. One is, I'm not going to talk about it today, is brain imaging studies that found that those people had a lot more activation in primary somatosensory cortex when they saw touch happening than, say, you and I would, assuming we don't have mirror touch synesthesia in the room. And then the second thing, and I'll skip this for a second for time, is they would also do reaction time experiments, where what they did is they would, this is from Banassi and Ward in Nature Neuroscience, and in this one, what they did is they had people watch videos of somebody being touched in the face while they actually had like little stimulators on their face. And the idea is that all of us, if we do this, if the touch happens and it's in the same spot, like the same cheek as the one in the video, right? And if you just have to respond, what side did you feel the touch, right? So you're kind of told, ignore the video. Like look at the video, but don't really pay attention to it. Your task is, did you feel the touch on your left or right cheek? If it happens on the same side in the visual display, you're a little faster than it happens on the opposite side. Okay, everybody is in the room. But the people with mirror touch synesthesia had a massive reaction time difference, or at least statistically speaking, a massive reaction time difference. And they also made errors as well, where if the cheek in the video was opposite of the actual touch, they would mismap it, or they would say that they felt it in both locations, suggesting that there's something actually real going on here. So why am I talking about this? And then specifically when we were talking about things like empathy and AI and things of that sort. Well, in this experiment, what they also did is they gave people an empathy questionnaire because they were very interested in, is there a relationship between this? And because if you think about it, if you have, what are the roots of empathy, right? And a lot of the times it's thinking about like, what is it like to sort of, put yourself in the shoes of somebody else, right? And then sort of think about experiencing the things that they experience. And what they found is that the mirror touch synesthetes had significantly higher emotional reactivity empathy scores. So a lot of these empathy tests, they have 3 subscales. There's the emotional reactivity one, there's the sort of cognitive one that's more like, I'm thinking about like having empathy. The emotional reactivity one is like sort of the reaction that you have about like, oh, I have this very strong emotional empathic reaction. And then I can't remember what the third one was. My apologies. But what they found is that mirrored synesthetes have significantly higher emotional reactivity scores. And this was replicated in another paper. And then in another paper after that, they found that mirrored synesthetes demonstrate more pro-social behaviors. They had I can't remember what the task was. It's in my notes, but I forgot it. But basically, like they had a pro-sociality experiment. They found that like the people that were the mirrored synesthetes were more likely to act in a pro-social manner in the experiments compared to the others. With this idea, right, that maybe not all of empathy, obviously, but right, maybe like a little piece of empathy is related to these kind of vicarious mechanisms that we're talking about before, right? The ability to kind of put yourself in there and to almost subconsciously feel what the other person's feeling may not even just have to be at the level of body, but may be at the level of other things as well. So I don't know a lot about social AI, but thinking about this, I got thinking quite a bit about sort of the differences between humanoid and non-humanoid robots. Okay, so if you think about these illusions that we've been talking about and about mirror to synesthesia, right? These illusions, right? If you have something that doesn't look like a body, it's not as effective, right? Or for mirror to synesthesia, which was related to empathy, if you've got something, right? I forgot to talk about a control condition in this experiment. In the control condition, and it's actually very important, instead of using faces, they had an object that was being touched on the left side or the right side. If you have an object that's being touched that just looks like I think it was like a circle or something like that, or a bowl, you don't get the effects that you have, right? So it has to be a face that's being touched while your face is being touched, because obviously those things are being mapped, right? So for vicarious touch, right, those mechanisms only work for bodies, right? They don't work for objects. And so if you have something that is perhaps more humanoid, right, perhaps something that is more like us, it's possible that, it could almost hijack some of these multisensory integration mechanisms that we've been talking about before to make it maybe be a little more easily relatable to or embodiable or things like that in comparison to a non-humanoid one. There are other things that we could talk about as well, but I will stop because I think I've gone way over time. And that's my life. Questions?
Thank you. Beautiful. Do we want to go straight into Masaki's talk, maybe?
Yeah.
Because we only have about 40 minutes, maybe, if we go for an hour and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So thanks, Brendan and Jared. Yeah, it's a very fascinating talk about seeing the scientific evidence of how plastic our body schema truly is. And it's great honor to be invited as a speaker for this Emory Keio joint seminar series. And to begin my talk, I would like to share a bit of my personal context and then begin with the contents. Okay. And most of the contents were presented in the last December's symposium, but I added some new pilot experiments video and also responded to the Jared's talk. So let me share a bit about myself. My background is cognitive science and human-computer interaction. Before, when I was the graduate school student, and I've been studying interaction design to support human learning using AI and the computer systems. And beyond simple machine teaching, where system instructs a human, I have developed various forms of engagement, such as co-learning, and the collaboration, and the companion, and the coaching, and the guiding. And these projects focus primarily on the cognitive domain, for like memorizing the picture's name or teaching each other on the programming domain or the reading the music score. But later I did the motor control domain, like playing the instruments or walking for the rehabilitation. In other words, they are designed to help users solve problems with correct answers or learn ideal movements and postures. And to give context to my current research, I need to share the personal turning point that reshaped my perspective during the pandemic. Despite my academic career in cognitive science and HCI, I found myself facing a middle life crisis where I felt a profound loss of life purpose. And this crisis, was not only bad thing, but it's good thing, good opportunity to think about my life. It's like a catalyst for the series of transformative and first-person experience. And also, I met this contemplative domain. In 2021, I engaged in theater work, which are very powerful integration of drama therapy, body work, and movement, authentic movement, and also mindfulness. And it's opened my eyes to the spiritual and somatic dimensions of our existence. And by 2023, I encountered and begin to study of the C learning and the CBCT, and still now currently exploring how awareness and the compassion can be systematically cultivated through lived experience. And also most recently in 2024, I experienced the 10 days the Vipassana meditation retreat. So that was a great transformation these 5 years. So my research focus has now slightly shifted to contemplative education because of those stories, and approaching it through somatic intelligence and artistic expression. I think that there are 3 domains like mind and the body and the soma. The cognitive domain responds to the mind. Here we learn language and the knowledge. The motor domain corresponds to the body. Here we acquire posture, movement, and behavior. And these are aspects which we can see from the earth side. In contrast, the new area I am exploring is the contemplative domain, which deals with the soma. Soma is terms used in the somatic psychology. It refers not just to the physical body, but to the phenomenological body. As Jared said, in the rubber hand experiment, they experienced as a phenomena and as a new body. That's a soma, I think. And in this domain, what is cultivated is not knowledge or movement, but qualities such as attention control or emotional feelings and empathy and compassion, and also presence. So what does learning look like in this soma domain? This slide shows the pedagogical model of C learning, form of contemplative education. The top level received knowledge correspond to the mind, where listening and learning take place. And the next level, critical insight, relates to the body, involving doing and feeling. And the bottom level, embodied understanding, is an area of soma, leading to being and becoming. I think this is very resonated to the Jared's talk, first in giving some setting situation like as a received knowledge, and then repeating the synchronizing touching as a critical insight, and then repeating it more than 5 or 10 times or 60 seconds, then the brain facilitates to as an embodied understanding. And here arises major question for today is AI robots may have a body as a hardware, but do they have a soma? If they lack a soma, can they ever truly reach embodied understanding? And what happened when we introduce AI and robots in contemplative education? So this diagram envisions learning with AI robots based on the mind-body soma classification. Look at the mind and body domains on the left. These are already being introduced in schools. For example, tablet-based learning, where AI presents optimal problems for students, or avatar AI demonstrating physical movements. These align very well with traditional education styles, solving problems with correct answers from outside. They offer significant benefits, such as providing tailor-made education for diverse children and promoting students' metacognition. However, this is a concern that too much optimization may reduce students' sense of agency and embodiment. On the other hand, what about the soma domain on the right? Here, the robot does not act as a teacher, but as a facilitator in exploration. But doubt arises, can a robot without soma truly ask deep questions? Can something like empathy emerge in that field? If we assume robots can influence students' emotions and empathy, this brings risks. It's not just positive. A robot's behavior could potentially hurt a student. This is an area without clear answers yet, but we must discuss design implications now. The concern I just raised is not an overstatement. Tools and technologies have a decisive influence on how we live and exist. Some people say technology is neutral. It's not the tool's fault, but the users if things go wrong. I think this view is too optimistic. Regardless of autonomous agency, tools have affordances. As ecological psychologist James Gibson proposed, humans are influenced by their environment and tools at an unconscious level. Look at that example in the diagram center. Thanks to navigation apps, we can reach our destinations without getting lost. This is the light side, good side. But simultaneously, our ability to orient ourselves and memorize routes is diminishing. This is the shadow side. As a philosopher of technology, Mark Kekelberg points out, it is too late to lament the problems once the technology is established and widespread. So we need to recognize these challenges from the development stages. Looking back at the history through the lens of the philosophy of technology, the history of tools and technology can be seen as a history of externalization of human capabilities. Let's review. In the past, we externalized muscle power and metabolic functions by inventing tools and fire. This dramatically changed our diet and survival rates and changing the eating habits. Skipping over the letter symbols, printings, and the steam engines, and yeah, many things are invented. But next, we externalized the faculties of calculation and memory, creating computers and the internet. We used to have people who are like living dictionaries, but now we rely on Google for everything or ChatGPT. And now we have a generative AI. This can be seen as externalizing human creativity. In fact, these slides were created in collaboration between myself and AI. So our very process of generation is changing. Looking at the history, it seems natural that technologies externalizing the capabilities of the soma and heart domain too will emerge. But when that happens, how will our humanity and ethics be transformed? So here, I'd like to rethink today's important theme, empathy, empathic AI. As I mentioned, reaching the level of embodied understanding requires deep empathy. However, empathy is not simply processing information or tracing another's emotions. According to the proposal by Brendan and colleagues, which empathy is an embodied joint action. It required shared commitment and shared field where bodies resonate with one another. In other words, compassion is not a private emotion, but a collaborative practice built together with others. So can this embodied AI truly participate in this joint action? Let me share a personal experience. The deepest empathy I have experienced began when someone disclosed their own vulnerability within a safe and secure space. So that story moved my heart and the hearts of others, and then react more resonated way. We felt that emotion through our own experiences, resonating with it, and we accepted each other with compassion. This arises from our shared vulnerability, the fact that we are all beings with life, designated to die, designed to die one day. And our shared humanity, the desire to live better or removing us from suffering, also support this. If that is the case, can a robot which does not die and does not possess this frailty truly share the space? And here is the just first attempt of the I asked the robot to guide me that meditation. Let's see.
Absolutely. Find a comfortable spot. Close your eyes gently and take slow, deep breaths. Focus on your breathing, inhaling peace and exhaling stress. Imagine a calming place, like a peaceful garden. Repeat this for a few minutes. Would you like a guided meditation voice or some calming music to help?
So what do you think? As you can see, it's still clumsy and its timing is not perfect. Just reading the scripts. No silent, no space. So why do these gaps occur? So what was missing? The hint lies in the correct concept of ki, do, ma from Japanese Noguchi Seitai, which is traditional bodywork therapy. These are crucial concepts for mastering Seitai, but they also get to the core of facilitation or coordination, the illusion, I think. The key is the timing, reading the flow and seizing the right moment. So the checking which timing, which opportunity is important to conveying the information. And the do means the intensity, sensing the resonance and maintaining the appropriate intensity for the partner. So in the rubber hand experiment, it's the intensity is also important, I think. If the pressure of the touching is higher, then it becomes participants may feel it's a fake. And if the intensity is lower, then the participants cannot learn from the repeating process. And the ma, the right side, ma indicates space. Holding the empty space or silence and watching over what emerges from within the partner. In the rubber hand experiments case, it's very important to give a silent space to reflect the feelings. If the synchronizing touching is only no silence, no away from the fingers, then it would be more difficult, I think. It's because of the silence. Silence is also the information of the synchronizing. So there is no touching is also meaningful for the learning the illusion. But it is difficult for current robots to adjust this kind of ki to ma based on somatic sensation. And now I'd like to share the findings from our recent pilot study, which conducted last week. And just briefly news report. And which I investigated how robotic embodiment influences the contemplative experience. We conducted within subject experiment with 15 participants, comparing the standard human recorded audio guide with a physically embodied robot agent, SOTA. The robot delivered the same meditation script, but included subtle body movements designed to mimic breathing. Let's see the demonstration. The guide is Japanese, sorry, but it's like a kind of fundamental breathing meditation.
呼吸の感覚がどんな感覚なのか直接に感じ取ってみます。呼吸の感覚を観察しているつもりでも、注意はいつの間にか別のところにそれているかもしれません。心に浮かんでくる思いや考え、あるいは体の別の場所の感覚に注意がそれていることに気がついたときには、淡々と優しく呼吸に戻ります。
So it's kind of very soft tone voice and talking slowly and having some silent space. Yeah, that induced more deeply experience in the meditation. And from our qualitative analysis, three key insights emerged. First, we found a shift in how the facilitator was perceived. Many participants experienced the robot not as a formal instructor, but as a relaxed co-practitioner or peer, meditating alongside them. This suggests that robot helped create a shared field or practice rather than the top-down teaching environment. And second, the robot's presence effectively mitigated social evaluation and anxiety. The common pressure practitioners feel when they think a human instructor is judging their performance. By providing a sense of companionship without social weight of human judgment, the robot enhanced the overall psychological safety of the session. However, we also identified a critical challenge. When the robot's pre-programmed movements or motor sounds failed to synchronize with the participants' own breathing rhythm, it actually hindered immersion. This lack of synchrony heightened the awareness of the robot as a distracting other rather than the part of the shared somatic experience. So these results underscore that for a robot to truly foster embodied joint action, it must go beyond preset routines and achieve dynamic biosynchronization to respect the practitioner's unique key dogma. So taking these factors into account, my suggestion is a hybrid co-facilitation as the optimal solution for now, currently. First, the robot's role is to be a neutral anchor. When humans guide, the quality of the field can be unstable depending on the instructor's embodied understanding or daily condition. But robots are free from trauma and emotional fluctuation. They follow the script accurately, ensuring the structure and safety of the field. Another major benefit is the ability to attract children's interest. This can lower the psychological hurdle for engaging in contemplative practices for the first time. However, there are challenges. Research reports indicate that the novelty effect of robots fades after 2 weeks to 2 months. Once children get bored, the educational effect cannot be sustained. Therefore, for maintaining long-term relationships, the human role becomes essential. The human role is to focus on the soma domain, specifically ki and do and ma. We entrust the structure to the robot while the human senses the moment and holds the place. To do this, teachers themselves need to continue their daily practice and cultivate their own soma and know what kind of the perception and the feelings occurs in that meditation practice. And building on Jared's fascinating talk about perceptual illusions, I just made last minute. I'd like to explore how we can extend these bodily boundaries through physiological resonance. As Jared demonstrated, the brain's body schema is remarkably plastic. It can incorporate external objects, like a rubber hand, into its internal map of the self through simple sensory cues. So this leads to a compelling question for the future of social AI. If we can make a robot feel like an extension of our own physical self, can we also find a deeper empathic connection with it? I believe the key lies in synchronization, specifically a process we call embracement. As shown in recent research, when the robot's movements are synchronized to users' breathing in real time, it significantly increases the sense of body ownership and sense of embodiment. This interoceptive pathway allows the users to experience the robot not as a separate machine, but as a part of their own soma, the lived felt body. By establishing this physiological resonance, I believe we can design robots for self-compassion. Imagine a robot that mirrors your internal state and breathes with you. It becomes a mirror for the interoceptive awareness, helping us attend to our own bodily needs with more kindness and presence. And giving the compassion to the others, giving to that kind of robot, then it becomes more, provides a self-compassion effect.
Masaki-san, we're almost at the end of our time.
Yeah, and I will finish that at 2 slides. So the question for the future, these are 3 questions, which I raised last symposium, but now I added from the rubber hand illusion. So to conclude our session, I'd like to bring together the insights on so persuading the brain through the repeated synchronization is the key to expanding our body schema. This suggests fascinating middle ground for the future AI. One hand, we can foster a connection via illusion using repeated physiological synchrony to make the robot feel like an extension of our own soma. This is a safe path that can enhance self-compassion without the risk of AI autonomy. On the other hand, we have the path of dance, achieving through embodied joint action through the AI's autonomous agency. While this allows for the deepest resonance and the mastery of Ki-Doma, we must face the paradox that this same autonomy carries grave ethical risks, such as the development of autonomous weapons these days, from news. So my final question to you all is this, can we design AI that is autonomous enough to master the dedicated art of Ki-Doma and foster our shared humanities without crossing the line into the dangerous autonomy that threatens it? Finding this balance is the next frontier of both contemplative science and AI ethics. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much. And thanks for Nori-chan and the colleagues and the Brenda.
Thank you so much. Okay, great. I think we were going to go to 7:30. Is that right?
Sure. Well, I mean, as long as people want.
Okay. Why don't we go on for another 15, 20 minutes, if that's all right. If people need to leave, that's fine. Please feel free to, which is so we have a chance for some conversation. Let's go popcorn style. Anyone, if you're online, please feel free to raise your hand. I'll try to pay attention. Do you have any thoughts first, Jared?
I think.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I was wondering because we saw that like clip or video of that robot facilitating a meditation. And my mind kind of jumped to potential cultural differences that could also maybe need to be accounted for when we're talking about like relationship towards a robot. Because I know historically in Japanese media, robots have been a lot more favorable characters, right? There's like Doraemon, Astro Boy, you know. But in the West, like we grow up hearing robots as like villains, you know, like Terminator is like the most famous robot, you know. Um, and so I wonder if that does impact the sense of like calmness and the sense to resonate with a robot, because one could be viewed favorably and as more human due to this media exposure, and then the other could be viewed as a threat in a sense. But
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the comment. Yeah, I think there's it's called the Frankenstein complex in the Western culture. And our Eastern culture, we are all of things like trees, houses, even the robots, and machines. Everything is the same as same agent. Treat us as same agent, and we feel like it's based from the animism, and so we can be friendly with the uh, non-organic human or the animals, not only animals and the human, but also the trees and the natures and so on. So if we have such kind of paradigm, then we can make a relationship with the AI robots. And I think that yeah, basic condition is the having a friendship, be a friendship relationship with the machines and AIs is very important to having the calm and resonate in meditation practice.
Yunmo?
Hey, thank you so much for these fascinating presentations. I do have a question for Dr. Matsubara. So because I had a feeling that when you were talking about the connection via dance with the AI or the robots, I thought you were trying to enhance the feeling of empathy between humans and these AI models. Um, and what I am observing in the field right now is how people are already using ChatGPT a lot as their personal therapist, instead of actually visiting like licensed psychologists or psychiatrists. And I had a feeling that AI models are becoming this like echo chamber of repeating or strengthening what the people are already thinking by sort of copying back what they are resonating back with them, what they're already saying, which is which isn't exactly in alignment with what therapy might do. And people are still thinking that they are getting therapy enough from these AI models. And so I think I'm seeing this like danger of people almost like empathizing too much or thinking that they are resonating too much with AI models. And so I was wondering if you are also thinking about how to um, or to make people understand that robots or AIs are not compatible for joint action, as you were saying earlier, with people because of because they don't share the vulnerability of bodies. Or do you? Yeah, I don't know if that question made sense, but thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's very we have a risk of the echo chambers and also yeah. So without the professional licensed meditate instructor only using with robots, then it would be very dangerous because of the the AI agent is made for to satisfy the users to engage more. So because they don't refuse, they don't oppose, say opposite, say they don't say no. And that kind of relationship is very biased, and it's not a true contemplative practice. It's yeah, it's like a fake, and yeah, so it's very important to think about to people have to let people have the opportunity to stop the engaging, and also the timing is another thing is the timing. When we use AI, we always decide when we use this agent. And that kind of thing is also not same balance. AI cannot say without a human's timing. So yeah, I think that kind of things we should think. Thank you. Thank you very much for the comment.
Can I ask a follow-up to what Yoon once said? Just I guess that's coming from your research on this. Are people showing empathy to these AI models in a way that's different or same to how you would if you were meeting a psychiatrist or if you were meditating, you were with a practitioner? Is there something different about the nature? Like they're engaging with them more, I think, in part, as Masaki said, about kind of the obsequious nature of them. Like they're going to kind of say whatever you want to hear. But I'm curious as if a combination of the fact that they're not embodied plus the fact that they're almost servile in what they do is making it to where there's not like a different kind or maybe less of or none of an empathic relationship with them.
So I think there is, so I've received some of like the entire chats that people had with an AI model, acting as if the AI model is their psychologist or their therapist. And sometimes in my particular case, because I'm looking into people who survived loss by suicide, and there's this model of psychological autopsy. And so because of the access to psychological autopsy is sort of limited in Korea, you're sort of using the AI models to do that psychological autopsy of the person who's dead, right? And so they're trying to trace back the reasons for them dying by suicide, which is inevitably sort of putting the evidences of what they know about the lives of the dead. And so they do engage a lot of suspicion of what they know, and they express that suspicion to the AI model too. And I feel like the AI models are sort of careful enough not to make it obvious that this is an echo chamber, and it almost feels like they are posing different questions to sort of lead them into certain ways that they have already been thinking, which is really difficult to self-criticize and to think analytically, especially because these are really deeply touching issues for the participants. And so I think I don't think I've reached any conclusion, but I think I'm worried about the sort of delusion of empathy with the AI models, and if these are delusions at all. I think was what I was concerned with, and I think Dr. Matsubara's approach was a really interesting, like the opposite side model of what I was thinking through. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
maybe a related sort of comment. I don't know, a question, but in your presentation, Masaki used the formulation tool/technology. And I like to get very pedantic as to what the difference between a tool and a technology is. And I think that part of what, and this is actually, I think, relevant, but technology has a social dimension, as an institutional dimension. It's something that's done by large groups of people. It has an economic dimension. And if we think about the dangers of AI as being something about specific to the tool AI, we're missing that. I think a lot of the dangers have to do with the technological and social and economic systems that's embedded in. Why are they sycophantic? Because they've been designed by people with a profit model that requires repeated engagement, as you mentioned. And why are people turning to them? Probably a lot of reasons, but Yun-Wan mentioned we don't have resources to see a person or to engage with it. So there's a lot of dimensions outside of perhaps the tool itself. So I'm just wondering what we can do to try to develop AI actually for the reasons that we want it. Otherwise, even if we have good theory, good practice, good ideas, it may not turn out so well. And I'm not sure if there's an answer to that, but it's a question that I have.
Yeah. I mean, this has come up in some of our discussions about using AI for C learning, right? Is that what are the AI models you're using, right? So if you're using these models, like if we're just using prompt level instructions, right? Then we're using these models that were not designed to teach social emotional learning, that were not designed for empathy, right? So then you can go under the hood, right? And kind of, try to kind of get into the code, right? But then you can go like all the way back and like, what would it mean to actually design an AI model for the purpose of social emotional learning and empathy, right? Because that would look very, very different, right? In which you weren't designing it to be sycophantic, to just like try to continue engagement, Because like what you were saying, because even the different models are different, like Claude AI, it's very often ends with a question to like keep you engaged, like, oh, so what do you think about that? Like that, right? Whereas Gemini might just kind of like end on a sentence or something, But none of them were designed for these purposes, I think. So that's a question. Anyway, this is just fascinating. Two thoughts. I had a slightly different direction. Sorry. I mean, I think that's a really important point, and also it seems to me a similarity between both your talks is that there's so when we talk about, as Yunwan was saying, kind of this danger of anthropomorphizing AI, right? We have this kind of idea of like this is a person falling into the trap, and that's a concern a lot of people have, and so we hear this kind of critique, and this came up in our Keio conference in December about people saying like, how do we help people understand this isn't a person, right? That's so important because it's so deceptive, the conversation. And we have these kind of probably evolutionarily inherited cognitive predispositions to anthropomorphize, right? And we have that term, anthropomorphizing. But what you were talking about, Jared, is like almost like a version of anthropomorphizing towards the self. And I don't know what the word is for that. In other words, you're imputing selfhood onto a thing that isn't you, right? So if anthropomorphizing is imputing humanity or consciousness or whatever onto a thing that is not that, right, onto another person, this is like in a way a parallel version, but it's about yourself. And I think what's interesting, and I'm kind of curious about that process, because I think the line also between self and other can also be a little blurry. So I was told this very funny story by a colleague of mine, how she was out we were talking about sharks for some reason, because I encountered a shark once while swimming. And she was out on a beach and she saw the fin of a shark coming along. And she was out with her friend, right? And they were kind of in the pretty shallow water. But without the conscious process of deciding, her body just started walking slowly back towards the shore. And I guess she was in a fear response. She didn't say anything to her friend. She didn't mention the shark. She didn't sound danger. She just walked like that, right? And only when she got back on, when she was on dry land, did she suddenly like turn around and realize her friend had been right next to her. Now, we were talking about this in the context of compassion, and I was thinking, okay, if a mother is there with her child, how likely is the mother to do that, right? So the survival mechanism, the sense of self, seems to include, I think for many, I'm not saying, I'm just saying the idealized mother, right? Like, it doesn't seem very likely, right? So there's like something that this other person is also part of you. So anyway, I'm just curious, like, is there a term for self-anthropomorphizing? Do you think it's a similar process? Is it totally unrelated? And is there also like kind of a like also a murky boundary? Because I kind of think compassion also at its highest forms is not eliminating the self-other distinction, but almost seeing another person as yourself in a way.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a term for self-anthropomorphizing.
You should coin it.
I think it's now time to come up with it. I mean, usually, like when we talk about that, we just talk about how you're embodying it, right? The anthropomorphizing, I mean, it's for me, it feels like they're at different psychological levels. Like one is sort of at the perceptual level and one is at the conceptual level. Now, the thing is that those levels probably, like, those levels definitely have connections back and forth, right? So, like, if you're anthropomorphizing something, so you're sort of creating a conceptual link, like you can see it having effects on the perceptual and vice versa. So that's kind of the way I am initially conceptualizing this. That said, I've never really thought about it in that manner before. The other thing is you mentioned this sort of self-other distinction. It's neat to me, like it's something that I've struggled with a little in like thinking about how to address it in research, because like we have such a strong sense of self that it's sometimes really difficult to think about how that can break down, right? And even in the case of the people with like mirror touch synesthesia, for example, it's not like when this happens, they're like, oh my God, I'm you now, right? But there's clearly some aspect of that that's broken down to that case. You only get these really big things in either brain damage, or I think there's some psychological conditions where that'll happen as well, where you have sort of disillusion of self and things like that. And so, but because it's so strong in us, it's very interesting to sort of figure out like how can we kind of look and see where these boundaries in us kind of break down. And one way that we've done it is just looking at it in touch, but there are probably lots of other ways where even though we have a strong sense of self, there are probably other aspects of either perception or cognition or anything in which those boundaries break down if you kind of dig deeper into it.
I also like as a follow-up, I want to add like a third dimension in a sense of like if like we have this self-other distinction, but I think we also have this collective human versus other distinction. And like when we run into the uncanny valley, it's like a very strong fear response. I'm like, I'm kind of wondering with these AI robots, like when is that point reached? Because we're talking about like movement and breathing of the robots, but like I think historically and culturally, like a non-human entity breathing or pulsating has been like a thing to like induce horror, And like, I don't know, because I'm really wondering, because it's such an aversive, uncomfortable reaction. And like, I can only speak with my own internal experience, but like, when I see Sophia the robot, like, I get like viscerally scared, And so like, I wonder, I don't know, I just wonder where does that come from in this conversation, and is that a concern? Because yeah.
This might relate a little bit to what MASAKI was talking about with regards to shared vulnerability. Like when you have something that I'm just going to freestyle for a second. I don't know if this makes any sense whatsoever. But when you have something that shares characteristics with the human experience, but at a either conscious or also unconscious level that it doesn't have the human experience, that can create some sort of dissonance where you're not having this sense of shared vulnerability, right? I don't think that even though that robot's doing all this kind of human stuff, right? I know because of these things that don't make it look human, right? Or don't make it look animate, that it's not.
but because it's close enough, it creates this sort of dissonance that's there. And then I don't feel this thing where it's like, if that robot short circuit, if the power goes off, I'm not going to feel sad. And I don't feel like it's vulnerable in the way that I'm vulnerable, the way that I can die, the way that I can feel pain. And so it could be related to that. I mean, I really like the idea of shared vulnerability being a big piece of all of this stuff when it comes to either empathy or thinking about embodiment, stuff like that. So that's what I would say. But, I'm a mere perceptual psychologist. Masaki might have something better to say. No.
I thank you all for staying on, and I think we should probably wrap up because we've gone quite a bit. But I forgot, Yolanda added in the chat, and I asked her also to respond because she is one of the people leading up our research efforts on Haru and also thinking about the potential role of embodied AI in social, emotional, and ethical learning, what it would be like to teach empathy in school, and our project related to that. So Yolanda, would you be willing to have the last word, offer your thoughts?
Sure. I also left a comment in the chat box, just showing my really great appreciation for Dr. Matsubara's presentation, because as mentioned before, I'm also a mental health practitioner in training. So just knowing those applications of robots and these somatic and mindfulness practices is really fascinating to me. And while speaking of the research me and Brandon, I'm helping Brandon working on is I'm trying to kind of related to what Dr. Matsubara has been worked on before. So thinking about and using embodied AI in a classroom setting as a either mediator or facilitator inside the classroom in a coexisting environment. So I think what Dr. Matsubara was sharing today is also really related to what we are thinking about, what kind of role robots could be having inside the classroom. Um, so so I think so that's why I also really appreciate the nuances and consideration of the arts of facilitation. And the concept of Ma is also something that we really emphasizes in our research as well, not only in the contemplative education, but also in the learning environment. Between robots and students and teachers. So I can see a lot of relations that a lot of things that could be related to our research right now, and I just find both presentations to be really inspiring, and I'm very honored to be like involved in this and getting new insights from every really amazing researchers' works. Yeah, and I'm very excited to keep working with everyone here. Yes.
Thanks so much, Yolanda. And I should mention Yolanda is also, this is very relevant to the research she's talking about because a book chapter that she's first author on for a book on the future of higher education, I think Routledge is the press, I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong, just got accepted last week. So she's working on the chapter for that. So this is very helpful to all of you. Thank you so much, Masaki-san. Thank you, Jared. Thank you for staying late. Thanks everybody for staying late. Those of you in East Asia, thank you so much for getting up so early. And I didn't realize there would be such a tie-in with Yunwan's next talk in this series, the AI tie-in. But Yunwan's been doing amazing research and has incredible data she's been collecting in South Korea. So we're really looking forward. And we've been missing her so much here in our lab this past year while she's been away. So we're really looking forward to that presentation. So keep an eye out for the email once we set the date for that. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Deej, for hosting us.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good one.